Welcome back to another edition of the Business Spotlight. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for coming back. If you haven't taken the time to subscribe, please do so. You can officially subscribe on YouTube and Spotify. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook. We're also on X. Since like a week ago, we started posting on X as well, if you're an X fan. And also TikTok. As long as we can do TikTok, I have a hard time getting my mind around what TikTok is, but they're being posted there, and we'll post there as long as we can, unless the government shuts it down, which is a very strong probability. So wherever you're at, find us, follow us, drop us a comment. Let us know why you like these podcasts, and you can always DM me if you have suggestions on who I should bring on the podcast. The community is growing. That's great, but I'd love to hear from you. So without further ado, Kyle, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure.
My pleasure. It's my pleasure to talk to you. I enjoy the conversations that we have. I think we're on the same track for what we'd like to see, what the things we'd like to accomplish here like to see accomplished here in Casper. What's happening? What are the latest developments on the city council?
Oh, geez. Well, we recently brought a couple new council members on board, so that was something that we did this week. Our vice mayor, Lisa Engebretson, she left. Our mayor, Steve Cathy, he left. And then Jaila Sutherland, who we had appointed for, I don't know, it was probably 16, 18 months or something, she's now left. So, yeah, complete leadership change, got a couple new faces. Mike McIntosh is joining us on council. He's been serving on the Planning and Zoning Commission for a while, and we had appointed him for a very brief window of time a couple years ago when we had some councilors move out of their ward, and so we needed someone to fill the spot. So Mike is already kind of a known factor to us, and I really like Mike. Just personally, he's a good guy. Matthew Larson is a gentleman that's joining us. Don't have much experience or exposure to Matthew yet, but I'm really looking forward to getting to know him and hearing from him on council. And then it's me and Amber again, and then Pat Sweeney, former state legislator. So yeah, a lot of people know Pat, and so I'll be interested to see kind of how he takes the reins of being a counselor and what he can bring to the table, because he's obviously got a ton of historical knowledge down in the legislature, but lived in Casper for his whole long time and ran many businesses. So yeah, looking forward to hearing his perspective too. So we brought some new faces on to council this week, and then we elected our new leadership. Mayor Ray Pacheco. Ray's been mayor a couple different times, and he provides good, stable, consistent leadership. So looking forward to that. And then Mike McIntosh, jumping straight into the fire, man, immediately becoming vice mayor. So I appreciate him stepping up, because it is a big time commitment, both of those leadership positions. And so I'm always thankful when people are willing to take on that additional burden, because serving on council is already a commitment, and then serving in leadership is a step above and beyond that. So I'm real thankful for both those guys for stepping in and contributing in that way.
Absolutely. And there's many of us that are very grateful that you were able to be reelected in a landslide victory.
Right.
So that's great. I'm glad you're on for another term. These terms last 2 years, is that right?
4 years, actually.
4 years, okay.
Yeah. So this is my second of, I already completed the first 4 years. This is my second one. And yeah, I'm very thankful to have received some generous support at the polling places. And so, yeah, I'm thankful I haven't lost the trust and faith of my constituents yet. Hopefully it means I'm doing something right.
Absolutely. I think you are. Just to dispel any rumors, these are not paid positions. These are all voluntary positions. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think there's a stipend involved in showing up at those meetings, things like that. But these are not. They cannot be compared to political endeavors you do on a federal level. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would say that's a correct assumption. So yeah, we do receive a stipend, $150 a meeting. Ends up being somewhere, take-home pay ends up being somewhere in the neighborhood of $570, $540 a month. So for a regular counselor, it's about $6,500 annually. And then the mayor receives double that. So they end up, it's about $12,000 a year, $13,000 a year. So, it's nothing to turn your nose up at, but right. All of us certainly have to hold down full-time jobs in the meantime. Can't pay the mortgage with $6,000 a year. So yeah, we all work full-time jobs. Sometimes folks are on council and they're retired. But yeah, for the most part, we all have to have full-time jobs in addition to our service on council, just because it's just a supplemental income. It's not a primary source.
So it's definitely, I mean, we can still consider it a volunteer position, and obviously offset some of your costs involved to driving down there, and to a very small extent, it offsets some of your time that you allocate to this. And at the same time, the time that you allocate is much more than just the meetings. I mean, you're all over social media, especially Facebook, as far as I can see, trying to bring knowledge and understanding to these different political issues that we're facing here locally. So your time is not just in the hour or 2 hours a week that you give. It's obviously much more than that.
Yeah, definitely. Our meeting this week was, we had a 2.5, 3 hour meeting, a little long, longer than average, I would say. But so yeah, we meet every Tuesday. It's either a work session or a regular meeting. And then in addition to that, you have the work packet that gets published every Friday, and you have to. I read those. Sunday is the day I carve out. Sunday is my homework day, and so it'll often take a couple hours to read through your packet. I do a lot of independent research to make sure that I'm coming to our meetings as fully informed as possible. So I do a couple hours independent research usually every week. Emails, if you make a point to try to respond to your emails, which I do. I don't get to every single one of them, but I try to respond to every email I get, answering the phone calls. We all serve as liaison on a number of different boards and commissions. So I'm on Metro Animal Shelter Task Force, Homelessness Coalition Task Force, and then I serve on, I think, 5 or 6 boards, and those are all monthly commitments. So yeah, it ebbs and flows, but I would say on average I spend probably at least 10 to 15 hours a week on council business. And so, yeah, I mean, when you consider all those other obligations, it ends up being probably $8 to $10 an hour if you're doing what I think you need to be doing to do the job well.
Right. But to put up with the beating that you put through sometimes on social media, because those social media posts or the rebuttals or the comments that are out there, you have to really want to do what you do.
Yeah.
It's not because you're paid. It's not because you're getting some type of incentive, unless you're, sadistic somehow and you want those comments, but I don't think you are. I mean, I know you enough to know that there's another reason. There's another reason why you do what you do. There's another reason why you put up with what you put up with, a lot of the unfortunate ignorance, but also the backlash of people with different opinions, and you're trying to have common ground, and it's not always easy because not everyone is intellectually honest. They have an agenda that they're trying to push. And what I've noticed, and that's, I think objectively speaking, you try to be as neutral as possible and give the facts. And that's always what I've noticed about you. But why do you do this? Why do you put up with what you put up? Because sometimes those comments online are pretty rough. And then plus the time. I mean, being paid $6 an hour.
Yeah.
What's behind all of this?
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's kind of the nature of social media. The algorithms are all based on controversy and fear and anger and stuff like that. And so, unfortunately, that's what a lot of the rhetoric. That's you reap what you sow in that regard. I had great opportunity to talk about this. The Chamber of Commerce does a Leadership Casper program, which I'm thankful to have participated in the past, and they're right in the middle of it right now. And they invited me and Councilor Pollack and some other local, our city attorney, city manager. We were all there, and we were on a panel yesterday. And so that was one of the questions that came up. And so I had a great opportunity to have that conversation with all those participants. My time spent on social media, I have sort of a love-hate relationship with Facebook and with social media. On one hand, in my opinion, it's really the only forum we have to talk about these issues that are in front of us on council. There's not a forum to talk about what I think are the important issues, and unfortunately, not many people are grabbing my arm in the grocery store or when they see me in public and wanting to do a deep dive on some of the things that I consider really important. And so it's really the only opportunity the public has and that I have to engage with the public on these issues. And so that's why I take advantage of it for the most part, is hopefully it's a opportunity for me to have some public discourse with people and to try to pull back the curtain a little bit and give people some additional context beyond what they might have read in the headline or in a 3-minute article that they're reading online. I also feel compelled to engage with people. I totally welcome and expect folks to disagree with some of the decisions we make on council. We make lots of decisions, hundreds. At this point, I've probably made thousands of decisions or taken thousands of stances on issues, and I don't expect anyone to agree with every single one of them. My own mother will not agree with every vote I cast while on council, and so that's to be expected. But I do feel compelled to engage with people when they come out of the gate with really harsh personal judgments, when they're attacking the character, the integrity of myself, of my colleagues on council, of city staff, who I have a great deal of respect for. I do get a bit bulldogish. There's a lot of bullies out there, and I don't like seeing it. And so when I feel like somebody's being bullying and casting harsh personal judgments against people that they just simply have a disagreement with, I do feel an obligation to jump into the fray in that regard. And then also just, again, going back to that public discourse, when the comment threads are really the only discourse happening, and like I said, social media skews towards the negative and the controversial, the angry and the fearful, I just want to make sure that whoever else may be reading the comments, I don't usually comment with the intent of converting the person I'm responding to. That rarely happens, unfortunately, but I do hope that the other people reading through the comments learn something, see our interactions, and take away something, because it'd be a shame if that's all people were exposed to is just this very harsh, judgmental, oftentimes completely inaccurate picture of what's going on. It's crazy the things you hear and you see in the comment threads. I swear people just pull things out of thin air sometimes. They're not based in any sort of reality whatsoever a lot of the time. And so to me, that's a form of digital littering. And I would call out someone if I saw them throwing trash right in the middle of 2nd Street. I'd call someone out for doing that. And I kind of do the same online.
Thanks for watching today. These podcasts are powered by PayRock, and PayRock is a payment solutions provider. We work with any size business or nonprofit, improving those payment acceptance efficiencies while reducing those overall costs. You can get a hold of me through any one of those social media channels, or you can give me a call. Let's get back to that podcast, which I think is amazing to you talked about deep dives. And I think that this forum that we're doing here is hopefully we can get into a couple of questions and do a deep dive. But even when you look at your comments, some of your comments are, they're almost a page, page long, which is good because I think it's important to not have those sound bites. Sound bites don't convince people. They don't. And I think that's why podcasts in general are getting a lot more attention because you can only talk so long with a sound bite. If you really want to understand someone, you sit down and you talk with them for 30 minutes on a subject, or at least 10 minutes on a subject. But a soundbite is a political way of trying to gain popularity, but it doesn't convince anyone of anything unless you're one of the sheep that just follow along and part of the crowd. But I think a lot of people want answers, and they want to know who they're voting for, who's sitting on city council. And I think this forum, as well as some of your, like I said, some of your posts are those deep dives. And I think if people would simply try to get a broader point of view on the questions that are at hand, they would possibly understand both sides of the argument, because there's not always one answer to these situations, especially for the things that you're dealing with on city council. One of the things I wanted to get into specifically was, I think, one of the most recently controversial subjects was the new Sixth Cent project. And I just wanted to know, because one of the things that came up on social media quite often was how did the city council prioritize these projects over other projects, and also how did community feedback affect the choices of the final decision, the final list of what you actually are trying to move forward on.
Sure. So we didn't get the opportunity to do a survey specific to the 6 cent. Surveys cost money, usually a few tens of thousands of dollars, and we always get criticism when we do those surveys. But I think having objective data is important, and they're useful to us. And so I do like when we're able to do surveys, but we can't do surveys for everything. And so this was one of those times where we didn't do a survey specific to the 6 cent, but we were utilizing past surveys that we had done in regards to the 5th cent or the 1 cent, in regards to what people's priorities are, where they'd like to see that funding go. And then we have other community forums that had taken place through the development of our Parks and Rec Master Plan, for instance, and that, through the community forums that we conducted to put together that, certain issues, certain projects rose to the surface. And we also tried to be mindful of the fact we wanted a good mix on the 6 cent, because the election itself is kind of a form of survey. It's a way to gauge temperament of where the community's at. And I think the results of it showed that people are supportive of our critical infrastructure. They supported the initial design for the fire station. They supported the equipment for the police dispatch center. And they didn't support some of the other things like a quad lift for the Hogadon or the second sheet of ice at the ice arena. And so it showed us that, there's an appetite to maybe help us catch up on some deferred maintenance or do these critical capital projects. But people, at least at this current point in time, are not willing to pay an extra tax to support things that they might consider luxuries, which is, adding on to our rec amenities or, improving some of those facilities just with where people are at right now. That didn't seem like something that they support. And so that is super helpful information for us as we go about, we have a 5-year capital plan that we are always kind of modifying and keeping up to date. And so that helps us know over the course of the next couple of years where we should be focusing our efforts. And so that's enlightening. But yeah, the 6 cent, just in general, it was definitely unique. I would say one of the main criticisms we got was people that live outside the municipal limits of Casper, but are in Casper a lot. Obviously, Casper is the economic hub of Natrona County. A lot of commerce and economic activity happens in Casper. So I did hear from quite a few folks that live just outside city limits that were frustrated that they couldn't participate, and I totally understand that. This was the first time any city in Wyoming had utilized the municipal tax option. Casper is the first one to try it out. We had reached out to our neighbors, our adjacent municipalities, and asked them if they would support a countywide 6 cent tax. It requires a majority of those neighbors to follow through with that, to ask the county commissioners to approve it and get it on the ballot. We could not corral a majority of municipalities, but there were a number of projects, especially the ones that actually ended up being supporting, which I'm thankful for. Fire station, we need to get working on Fire Station 1, the police dispatch equipment. And so we felt like we still needed to leverage the mechanisms available to us to get the revenues for those. And so that's why we decided to take advantage of the municipal tax. So I know some people would have liked to have seen a countywide tax, and I honestly would have liked to have seen it myself, because there's maybe projects that our neighbors need to get done as well that they just can't find in their existing budget, and they could have thrown those projects on the ballot and we could have gauged community sentiments about it, but that didn't end up being the case. So we just had a very Casper-centric view. It's a very Casper-centric tax. But yeah, we'll see how. This is the first time a city in Wyoming's utilized it, so we'll see how it plays out.
How many projects were on the lists that people voted on? How many were on the initial list, and how many were actually selected and chosen?
Oh, buddy, I tried not doing too much research coming in because I wanted to have an organic, natural conversation. But man, that's one of those ones I should have fact checked myself on. I think we had 8 projects, 6 or 8, and I think 4 of them ended up passing. I wish I could rattle them off the top of my head, but I think we ended up with 4. Washington Park Bandshell, I believe, was approved. The police dispatch, the fire station, and I'm sure there's one more, but I just can't think of it off the top of my head. But
so they're roughly half.
I think it was about half. Yeah.
Okay, half of them. Does the overall rejection of the other ones, is that an indication of a public sentiment? Are there any lessons learned about the fact that not everyone was in support, and then we threw a couple of these out the window? I mean, what's your feedback on that?
Yeah, I've had some public conversations with folks about that. Their perspective being that because it was rejected at the ballot, we should never pursue those projects. I guess for me, the takeaway is not as black and white or as definitive of that. Clearly, people did not support additional taxation in order to, achieve those goals or build those projects. But my perspective is not that people would be opposed to completing them at some point in time with additional, different sets of revenues. So, for instance, the ice sheet. People did not want additional taxation and additional sales tax to complete the ice sheet, but the user groups for the ice arena, they have pulled together a lot of private donations. They've raised millions of dollars right now to match what the city's previous commitment was, which was $3.2 million. And so if those private donors can raise the remainder of the money, which is their goal and intent, and combine it with that 3.2 million that City Council had previously committed a couple years ago, if they can raise all those private dollars, I would still like to see that second sheet of ice done. We still have students that are having to get on the ice at 6 a.m. and stay on the ice, up until 11 p.m. at night because there's just so little ice time. The second sheet of ice could already fill 40-50% of its capacity on day one after it's built, just because there's so much demand right now. And so, I guess that's my perspective, is that if we can be creative in the way that we find the revenue to make these projects happen, I think the public would still support them in general, but obviously they just didn't support the additional sales tax to make it happen, which I totally understand.
I can already see the comments in a couple of years if the ice rink the second sheet of ice is done.
Oh, totally.
They're going to say that, well, we told you we didn't want that.
Absolutely.
And that's part of again, it goes back to the deeper dive is if there's private dollars paying for this to a certain extent. But what about the feedback that we saw online about people saying that they read that you're going to do some of these projects anyway, despite the fact that we chose the 4, you might actually end up doing the 8 if there were 8.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of got to take it as they come. So I think back on the specific purpose tax that failed a couple of years ago, it was Midwest Street Construction Project downtown, and it was the Midwest Edgerton Water Line. That one failed, if people will remember. And those projects were both on the ballot together. It was not separate projects, separate line items like this most recent 6 cent was. That one failed, and we did get some feedback. We ended up going forward with the Midwest Street Project anyways, and so we did get some flack about that, people saying, well, we voted against this tax, and surprise, surprise, you found the money anyways.
Right.
But that is only because Evansville, there's urban renewal grants from the federal government that allows municipalities to build these sorts of projects, and this urban renewal grant, all of the cities in Natrona County take turns in line to receive that grant funding. Evansville was next up in line. They didn't have any projects that qualified, and so they offered us their position in line, essentially, to access those urban renewal funds, and that's why we were able to complete Midwest. And so, yeah, going back to my earlier point where, you never know when those opportunities are going to come up. At the time that we had put the specific purpose tax on the ballot, we did not have access to that urban renewal grant funding. And in order to complete the Midwest Street Project, it would have been very painful. It was a little over $2 million, and our entire streets budget is only $5.5 million. So it would have taken half our streets budget just to complete that one little section of street. And that wouldn't have been responsible, in my opinion. And so you never know when those opportunities are going to come up. But I think it's responsible to take advantage of them, because that's any dollars that we can pull from outside our community into our community. Everyone that lives here is only going to benefit. That's less dollars. Thankfully, we did not have to take that $2 million out of our streets budget, because that's only going to push maintenance out for other necessary road work that needs to happen. And so I can understand where people are coming from. It all depends on how you get across the finish line. But I can see people's perspective why they might have that belief or have that position.
How does the city council plan on managing the usage of those funds that were allocated for those projects? I mean, I'm sure there's plans in place to make it efficient and transparent. And what does that look like?
Sure. Yeah. This is our first time doing it, so I'll be interested to see myself how it plays out. But we are obligated by state statute. The money raised has to go to those. It cannot be used for anything else. That would be illegal. And so we, definitely won't be using those funds collected for any other projects outside the scope of what was passed in November at the ballot box. For our 1 cent revenues, we do get monthly reports so that people can stay up to date on what our revenues are year to date, how they compare against projected revenues, how they compare against past year's revenues. And so we already do monthly reporting for the 1 cent, and folks are welcome to read it's our information packet on a monthly basis. And so my guess is it'll be the same with the 6 cent. We'll track it separately. It'll go to a different account, and we'll get to see in real time on a month-to-month basis how much we've collected. We have gotten questions from people about, do you support projects, one at a time, or do folks get a little bit of funding? Do all the projects get a little bit of funding over time? And my understanding is that's how it's going to work, is that as revenues come in, it's distributed out to people, because, the For instance, the dispatch center, millions of dollars. They're not going to spend millions of dollars on day one. Like the fire station, there's designs, and then there's amendments to designs, and it's a phased approach. And so, my understanding is that as the revenues come in, we're going to try to be as efficient as possible by making sure all those projects get started as quick as possible and continue along their timeline as quick as possible. But really, I think it was 16 months is the amount of time, 14 months maybe even, expected to raise all the revenue for the projects passed. So with just a little over a year, we should have all the revenue needed for all those projects to be completed. So it's a relatively quick timeline, especially compared to the 1 cent, which is a 4-year cycle.
You spoke about transparency and those documents being available every month. Some people are advocating for a DOGE, a Department of Government Efficiency.
Yes.
Is that necessary?
I don't believe so. People already, the 2025 budget is published online. The city has a page for all of our financial documents that people have access to anytime they want it. Like I said, the 1 cent sales tax reports are in our information packet on a monthly basis. So we pass bills and claims at every regular meeting where people can see every single cent, every single check that's being cut. They can see exactly where it's going, what the amount is, what it was for. So I already feel like Casper's very transparent in this process. Everything we talk about when our budget discussions happen here in a couple months, it's all done in open forum, and people can watch those meetings if they'd like. And so I don't personally feel like it's necessary to have a citizen organized Department of Government Efficiency. But hey, if there's a group of folks that want to get together and talk the budget and bring their ideas to us, all the power to them.
Mm-hmm. That's different. That's different. Bringing your thoughts and opinions and sharing them in open forum. That's different than, I think, scrutinizing the fact that things might not be transparent. Because from what I'm hearing, they're explicitly transparent.
Yeah.
You can download the things in a PDF, the documents in a PDF format. You can attend the meetings. We're not going to find a hidden suitcase full of $100 million someplace that we're going to allocate and do the project we want to do. Right. It doesn't work like that.
Exactly.
So in that regard, you mentioned that in a year's time, we're probably going to have we'll be able to earn through the tax the tax levy the entire budget for those projects. Mm-hmm. So what happens after that? Because that's another one of the controversial points is the 1 cent, the 6th cent will continue to be on. Will continue to pay for those things.
Yeah. So I think it's 14 months, and after those 14 months, that tax will shut off. It's not a immediate thing because there is a bit of lag time in regards to point of sale purchase, and the by the time when somebody purchases a project and by the time the city actually receives the revenue, there is a little bit of lag time there. So you can't turn the spigot off immediately, but certainly as soon as we clear that those revenues that were passed at the ballot, we're going to turn it off as soon as possible. And that's not to say that you might not see future 6 cent proposals. That's absolutely a possibility. And that's some of the criticism we get in regards to the 1 cent is people have said, well, it was first implemented in 1976 and we still have it. So that's an illustration that is permanent. And my rebuttal against that is it's certainly been in place for the past 50 years, but that's only because every 4 years the community continues to show the support in November to continue it because they feel like the projects are important. And so, yeah, it's possible you may see a future 6 cent at a future time, but the community will have an opportunity again to weigh in and let us know how they feel, whether those projects have merit or not. And I am always going to be these big capital projects that cost millions of dollars. I always want to put as much of that control in the public's hands as possible because we get very limited feedback on council. We can do our best to guess where the community sits. A lot of us are very involved in the community, and so it feels like we have a good finger on the pulse, but I would like to have the public, the voters, control as much as possible as far as those big, large capital purchases because that's the only way you know for sure where the community sits. We can do our best to guess up on the days, but sometimes we get it wrong, and sometimes we have very little feedback to go off of. And so, unfortunately, we did not have very many people participating in this most recent election, especially in the primary. So that was a little disappointing, but still, it's better than us 9 people up on the dais doing our best to figure it out. I'd rather have the thousands of Casper voters tell us at the ballot box.
Democracy.
Exactly. It's a good thing.
Let's transition into the new budget method that you're using. You mentioned that a couple weeks ago. That you said that you're implementing something new. How does this new? Can you describe this new budget method, and how is it going to accurately address the city's financial challenges?
Sure. I'm not an accountant, so I will keep it very surface level, very elementary, only because that's all I'm capable of. But currently, the city of Casper uses what's called incremental-based budgeting. And my layman's explanation of how that works is that we take the budget that we had from last year, we kind of look it over from a high level and decide, do we need to increase the funding for certain departments based on any services that we've added or need to bolster. And so you essentially take the previous year's budget and just modify it to fit the needs of your next fiscal year. There's a lot of pros and cons. There's a lot of different budgeting methods. There's what we use currently, the incremental-based budgeting. There's zero-based budgeting. The pilot program that we're going to begin is called priority-based budgeting. And so how this is different from incremental-based budgeting is that we're not just simply taking last year's budget and just modifying it for this year. We are going to be essentially ranking and prioritizing all of City of Casper services and putting them on a quadrant. There's a 4-square quadrant, and it's high impact, low cost services, high cost, low impact services. And so the goal is that we are putting as much funding as possible towards those high impact, low cost services so that we're stretching our dollar as far as possible and really paring down our allocations to those high cost, low impact services. They cost a lot of money and the community gets very little in the way of impact. We want to try to reduce funding to those projects or services or programs as much as possible so that at least for the community, it feels like their dollars are being stretched more because we're providing those services and programs that they think are the most important, that they'd like to see more of. And so I'm hopeful that it'll make sure that our budgeting is more objective, that we are using the data we have on hand as far as what community priorities are, and we are truly allocating that money towards those priorities based on that input. It also leverages artificial intelligence, which you have to be, I'm a skeptic at heart, so you got to be careful about letting computer programs and algorithms take too much control over how you're spending your money. But really, when you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars, in my opinion, to be objective and to make sure you're allocating those monies in as evidence-based way as possible, you need to leverage, human brains are only capable of so much kind of analyzing. And when you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars, the scope of that is just kind of beyond most people's, including mine, comprehension. And so I'm looking forward to leveraging a lot of people using ChatGPT and Gemini and Copilot and stuff these days to expand and improve upon their productivity. And I think it can do the same for the city in regards to budgeting.
Do you see any overt risks involved with this change, or do the benefits outweigh these risks? How do you see that compared to what you were doing last year and the previous years?
Yeah, I mean, it'll be new. So it'll definitely be, it's an experiment of sorts, and that's why it's a 2-year pilot program. It does require a lot more work up front because it's a totally different method. And when you use incremental-based budgeting, a lot of the work had already been done the previous year. And so, there is work to adjust it. But at least this first year, my understanding is that we essentially have to start, it'll be very similar to zero-based budgeting in that regard, where you start with a clean slate and you simply build it from the ground up. You don't say, oh, we gave Parks and Rec, $3 million last year, so that's where we're going to start this year. You start from zero and you look at all the programs and services that Parks and Rec offers, and you go one by one through programs and services, and you analyze, is this program one of those high impact, low cost programs for the community? And if so, then we're going to give it the staffing and the money that it needs to fulfill those services throughout the course of the year. So there's going to be a lot more work up front. And I think that, our city manager has expressed a little bit of anxiety about how that's going to work because he's actually never managed a city budget using this method. It's a relatively new method from what I understand. So yeah, they all have pros and cons. The cons would be from what I've read about priority-based budgeting, is that it can be maybe too objective, too cold and calculating. And so that is something you have to be mindful of. It's something I've had to be mindful of myself. I'm a very data-driven person, and so I've been told in my personal or professional life that, very much like Spock in Star Trek, in his mind, he's objective, he's data-driven. There's no room for emotion, but we're all people. People are emotional creatures, and so sometimes maybe it is necessary to take into account people's emotional, the Ayers clock downtown Casper might be a good example, a recent example, where from just a strictly fiscally conservative approach, it was tough for the city to allocate parks staff to maintain that and to spend money on that. But from an emotional perspective, that clock has been downtown for decades, and people have an emotional attachment to it. And so in those sorts of cases, maybe it's worth, maybe we should set aside our fiscal conservative goals and acknowledge the fact that it means more to people than what shows up on paper. So,
does this new method or new strategy, does it incorporate public input differently or better, in your opinion?
I think it'll incorporate it better because we are identifying priorities based on the feedback that we've gotten from the community to inform how we put together the budget. And so I'm hoping that people will see and experience a budget that is more kind of in line with what their priorities are. And, we're having to do, the cost of everything is just going up. And so we're trying to provide the same level of service at the same cost, which is impossible. But hopefully, if we are allocating our monies in a more effective and efficient way, we can spend less, but people won't feel it as much, because it's always painful when you cut any service or program. Some are used more than others, and again, some are high impact, some are low impact. But at the end of the day, cutting programs, cutting services, some people are going to feel that. Some people are going to be upset about that. And so the goal is to upset as few people as possible. And I guess we'll see how we do. But
you definitely have to come back in a few weeks. There's a ton of other questions I wanted to get into, but at the same time, I want to respect viewers' attention span as well. Sure. But I think these conversations regularly every month or every 6 weeks could be very beneficial to the community. But in closing, I'd like to hear, what are your thoughts for 2025 and beyond? Where is Casper going, and what is the direction that you see the city council taking the city?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't foresee us making any super bold changes. I think everyone's a little bit weary. We have a new incoming presidential administration, and I think people are just wondering what to expect from that, wondering how that's going to look. I personally am going to advocate caution in that regard. I'm hoping that sales tax revenues match what we've projected every year that I've been on council. I'm very thankful that the city manager, the city staff put together very conservative budgets. So we've never found ourselves needing more money than what we had projected. We always have a little bit of excess. So I'm hoping that continues to be the case, but you never know. We live in a wonky time, man. A lot of moving parts here in the United States, but also across the world, that could really shake up how people are spending their money and the money that we're receiving. And here in 2 years, I believe the petition just got enough signatures to cut property tax in 50%. And so that'll be on the ballot in 2026, so long as the legislature is not kind of preemptively changing that ahead of time. That would be a significant change to cut property tax 50%. I believe 12% of our general fund is reliant upon property tax. And so that would be a reduction in millions of dollars of revenue. If the legislature did not backfill it, there's a proposition out there. I believe Representative Steve Harshman had proposed backfilling a reduction in property tax with sales tax. That could really change the dynamics here locally in regards to support for the 5 cent and 6 cent. If they add 2% sales tax at the state level, that would mean we'd be going from 4 to 6. And then we're not asking people for a 5 cent and 6 cent. We're asking people for a 7 cent and an 8 cent. That really changes the dynamics of that conversation. I think that would be a much harder sell. So You know, I'm definitely anxiously seeing what the legislature does this year in regards to property tax and see if they get out ahead of that, because if not, you know, we'll definitely have to be potentially changing the way we're doing things, or maybe getting used to, you know, having less authority over what sort of revenues the city's able to bring in. Because if we have 6% statewide sales tax, again, that's going to really change. I think that's going to change people's support for the additional taxation levied at the municipal and county levels. So,
Absolutely.
Yep, we'll see. I'm hoping everyone pays attention to the legislative session, and we have a lot of new faces in the legislature. You know, I think the legislature could potentially go a very different way from where it has in the past. So, yeah, we're sort of victim to what happens down in Cheyenne, and we'll be paying attention closely.
Absolutely. No, we'll definitely have many things to talk about in a few weeks. That's for sure. Kyle, thank you for joining us today. It's always a pleasure to chat with you on what's happening on city council and the future of our town. And thank you for joining us on this podcast. Make sure you share these podcasts. Drop a comment in there. Let us know what you liked about this particular podcast, and subscribe. Like I said, we're everywhere. We're on. If you're on social media, we're there. So find us and follow us, and we'll see you in a couple weeks. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.